Hello teachers, welcome to your video on funds of knowledge. And those of you who know me well know this is one of my favorite topics, so I could talk about this for hours and hours, but I'm going to keep this as an introduction. So we will be brief and just talking about what it is and why it's important, and I hope that you use this information to go further and conduct a little more research on your own. I'm going to share my screen with you and go over a few basic points related to funds of knowledge. So first off, what is it? Funds of knowledge is defined as historically accumulated and culturally developed bodies of knowledge and skills essential for household and individual functioning and well-being. And that's from the original text of Gonzalez Molinamonti wrote on funds of knowledge, where they took basically a group of teachers and trained them as anthropologists. They took them out into the community and they studied families in their school community and looked at their behaviors, their skills, their daily lives, and looked at all the things that children are gaining from those daily lives, from their parents and their communities and their environment. And they identified those skills and they call them funds of knowledge. Hence this definition here says historically accumulated, meaning that it's a set of skills that are passed down through generations in your community. Culturally developed bodies of knowledge, meaning that your culture is definitely an important aspect of those bodies of knowledge. So a lot of it has to do with who you are and your experiences and your values, as well as just your daily life. So what your household is like, what you do every day, all the daily functions that you enact to be yourself and live your life, those make up your funds of knowledge. The wonderful thing about this original study is that these teachers then took those set of skills and those funds of knowledge and back into their classroom and designed lessons around them and saw amazing growth from their students through that process. So that's why we're talking about it, and that's what the importance of it is. So where do they come from? Your funds of knowledge can come from any area of your life. So here's just some examples, but these can be just, a taste of it. So things like your friends and family might contribute, your family occupations, activities your family does in your free time, traditions and values, your home language, even things you do for entertainment, for example. All these can contribute to what your funds of knowledge actually are. Now, why do we talk about them so much? Well, there's a few main reasons. The main three that I believe are kind of our push for why funds of knowledge should be studied is the deficit thinking that exists in education. We can use funds of knowledge to counter that. The achievement gap, which has been a long time issue in our field, and also behavior problems and motivation in school. So we'll talk briefly about each of those and how they might be addressed through funds of knowledge. So first off, if we think about funds of knowledge being the process of identifying those home lifestyle and personal experiences that give you a set of skills and base of knowledge, we are automatically going to be countering deficit thinking. And here's how. A lot of times, teachers unknowingly and unconsciously have a deficit model of thinking about their students, meaning that they view their students as people who come in with very little knowledge, and it is their job to give them knowledge. Now, to an extent, that is what teaching is, right? We are giving students new knowledge. But what we understand is that they do not have this certain academic content knowledge. That doesn't mean they don't know anything, right? So teachers sometimes get to a point where they start to view students as people who know very little about anything, and that is deficit thinking. The other way this might come about is deficit model thinking regarding the knowledge you do have being wrong. So a lot of times if teachers view their students as people who have the wrong behaviors or the wrong values or the wrong cultural norms, they see themselves as someone who needs to fix them or change the students as a person, as opposed to helping them grow as a person. And so we are not helping students unlearn who they are or change who they are. Quite the opposite, we're helping them become more of who they are, right? So that deficit thinking does exist quite a bit, and it also contributes to negative stereotypes. And the way I see quite a bit of it happening is actually through when we see demotivation or lack of motivation among students. A lot of times teachers start to attribute that to something being wrong with the kid or wrong with the kid's upbringing or their family. And that's why they're not interested in my lessons, right? So that's the wrong attitude. That is deficit thinking, and it contributes to negative stereotypes. So if we use students' funds of knowledge and we take that perspective of building all of our lessons from a starting point of things students already know and are already familiar with, then we are automatically going to be countering that. It's a whole different way of looking at teaching. The other purpose in using funds of knowledge and addressing it regularly in our classroom is to counter the achievement gap. Now, a lot of times lately, in the last several years, people have been shifting to a new set of terminology, which is the opportunity gap, because the achievement gap puts all the onus on students as opposed to on the education system or teachers themselves. And so if we call it the opportunity gap, we have a little different perspective. And we think of it as, well, okay, we have a group of students that clearly, if you look at this data from last school year, clearly we have a group of students that are not reaching this highest set of opportunities as others, and there's reasons for that. So if we look at them as systemic reasons and things that we could possibly address through our curriculum and our instruction, and maybe not all of it is stemming from that, but definitely some of it could be, and then that means that using funds of knowledge could counter that. We can say that if we are looking at our curriculum and our instruction and we're intentionally planning to build off of students' knowledge that they have access to already, that I didn't have to give them that knowledge, they already had it, and I'm building off of that to help students gain access to new content, then that could potentially minimize this opportunity gap and make it smaller, right? The next important issue related to using funds of knowledge, or at least a purpose for studying funds of knowledge and implementing it, would be behavior and motivation. A lot of times we see the ongoing issue of students not being engaged. Why are they not interested in what I'm teaching? Why aren't they trying? Why aren't they connecting with the content that I'm teaching? They don't seem to care, right? And sometimes that leads to poor behavior, or what we perceive as negative behavior or misbehavior. So it goes without saying that if the content is something that already makes sense to them and is connected to their personal lives, it's going to be more relevant, right? Or culturally relevant to that person. And therefore, motivation will be higher because you'll have an automatic connection. You'll feel like you're already a little bit of an expert, right? So here's a little diagram to show you what we're talking about and how some of these different ideas connect. Cultural capital is something that we'll get into. That's a whole other video. But everyone has cultural capital, but not everyone's cultural capital matches the majority or dominant culture. Things you know from home, things you experience, your own personal skill set, things you value, those might be different from what the majority society enforces as positive or good. And if they are not the same and don't match, then it's very likely that you're going to have a harder time in school. And so that is not a problem with the person. That would be a deficit model. That is actually a problem with the system that we need to change, right? So how do we do that? We do that with using funds of knowledge. Everyone has funds of knowledge, but they're not always used in class. So if there's something that you knew as a kid that you were well versed in, some skill set you had that never got tapped into and you never got to use it in school, that's an example of you not getting to use your funds of knowledge. If teachers intentionally seek out and tap into those funds of knowledge and put them into their lessons and build it into their curriculum, we make that conscious choice. We are increasing the opportunity for that kid to be engaged, the opportunity for that kid to have an advantage in that lesson, and therefore in that school setting in my classroom, they now have better social capital, meaning that they are a more valuable member of that group now because they can contribute more and connect more with the processes taking place. So I hope that you enjoyed this video and got a little bit of background knowledge on funds of knowledge. Seek out a little bit more and do some more research on your own. Good luck.